Darth Xenu. I know that each church keeps an office for Hubbard in case he returns, and considering Hubbard's revelation in OT8 that he will fulfill the role of the biblical Antichrist, how do upper-level Scientologists see their version of end times playing out? Do you think they are looking for this person who would be the beast of Revelations? And considering the underground vaults storing, preserving the entirety of Scientological materials, would you say they expect or would even work to facilitate an apocalyptic event? I know this is some pretty deep shit, but I would really appreciate if you could address this aspect of their teachings that no one ever seems to mention. Okay, well, first thing I want to correct on this question actually straight away is there's kind of this idea that goes on with people who were never in Scientology that all the things that you know because you've read it on the internet are the same things as what the people in Scientology know. And they are not. And I mean, they are so much not that you can get a very skewed idea of what actually goes on in the bubble world of Scientology if you think that all the things you read about on the internet are common knowledge amongst Scientologists. Xenu story, for example, and I think I mentioned this in my last episode, like 1% of Scientologists know about the Xenu story. The rest of Scientology is utterly clueless about it. They have no idea what you're talking about when you start talking about Xenu. It's even more so with this question in regards to the OT8 bulletin where Hubbard talks about himself being Lucifer and, the bringer of light and this whole thing. And also, I think this issue is also a bit misunderstood, but I'm not going to get into that right now. As I understand it, there have been 3 versions of OT8, and this bulletin that Hubbard talks about himself being Lucifer was only in the very first version of it, and they pulled it shortly thereafter. So not only are we talking about 1% of Scientologists know about Xenu, well, 1% of that 1% knows about this issue where Hubbard talked about, himself being Lucifer. No one else in Scientology is aware of this. So you're asking me a question about literally a handful of people in Scientology. Now, that being clarified, I'll answer the question more broadly as to what do Scientologists think about in terms of end of days and that sort of thing. And factually, they don't really think about it too much. They think that they need to move faster, do more. They're constantly pushed for getting more money in because the world's clearly going to hell in a handbasket according to the International Association of Scientologists and all the briefings they get, and they're told all the bad news of everything horrible that's going on in the world, and all of that is given to them so that they'll give more money. But there's no end game in sight where there's a plan. There is no plan in Scientology in the bubble world for what happens if there's a nuclear war tomorrow. What happens if World War III starts tomorrow? There's nothing, and they don't talk about it amongst themselves much. At least they didn't any time I was ever around in the 27 years I was in. We just sort of did this, just sort of, we got to move faster, we got to work harder because things are bad. But there is no plan, and there certainly isn't anybody in Scientology who's trying to bring about the end of the world because they have some idea that that would be a good thing. That is just not true at all. Nobody in Scientology is wanting the civilization to collapse and fall apart, and nobody in Scientology wants the preservation of the tech projects, those vaults with all the materials written in metal plates. Nobody wants a scenario where those things have to be brought out and used because civilization is tanked. That's the last thing anybody in Scientology wants. Remember, most Scientologists are rich, affluent white people, and they are not the kind of people who want to, they're not survivor types. So, in other words, survivalists who have underground compounds and, out in the, desert of Utah or the forest of Montana or something. That's not your Scientologists. So that's kind of, I guess, what I could say about that.